Hello and welcome to another Magic Duels gameplay. Today we're taking a look at black-white tokens, which got a lot of new upgrades with Amonkhet. So let's dive right into it here. I can give you a quick overview. So starting out with our 1-drops, we just have a Fatal Push, single black to kill a creature with converted mana cost 2 or less, and with Revolt converted mana cost 4 or less. So just a nice efficient removal spell that can also deal with annoying vehicles. Then we have Henweir, Militia Captain, which is a 2-mana 2/2 that at the beginning of our upkeep, if we control 4 or more creatures, transforms into the Cult Leader that spawns a 1/1 black and white human cleric token every turn, and the power and toughness is equal to the number of creatures we control, so a very scary card for the opponent to deal with if we have multiple creatures out, and of course in a tokens deck it's going to be easy to generate multiple creatures for the Militia Captain to transform. Then we also have Anointer Priest, which looks like an innocent card, but actually adds up quite nicely in this deck, since we gain 1 life whenever a token enters a battlefield under our control, and then of course we can also embalm the Anointer Priest for 4 mana, which means it enters a battlefield as a token when we exile it from the graveyard, so it also gains life when we embalm it, and of course gaining all that life just has the purpose of keeping us alive long enough to get to the late game, get all our engines going, and then we should be able to win a longer game. Then we also have Smuggler's Copter, because why not? We can easily crew it with all our 1/1 tokens. It helps us dig for our key cards, and it can also put some cards into the graveyard, like the Anointer Priest, that can still generate some value once it's in the graveyard. We also have some Aftermath cards that can get us some value when discarded. We also have Hidden Stockpile, which is a nice 2-mana enchantment that can generate tokens when we enable Revolt during our turn, and we can also pay a mana to sacrifice a creature and scry 1, which helps us enable Revolt, and of course the scry 1 helps us dig for our key cards, and sacrificing cards like Anointer Priests is not a big deal since we can still get them back through Embalm, and of course if we do have multiple Hidden Stockpiles going, we can quickly swarm the board. Then we have Weaponcraft Enthusiast, which thanks to Fabricate 2 can make 2 1/1 servo tokens when he enters the battlefield, so we get 3 creatures for just 1 card, which is very nice in this deck. And then of course we can sacrifice the 0/1 body, 2 cards like Hidden Stockpile to still get some value from it. Then we also have 2 copies of Anguished Unmaking, just all-purpose removal spell that can deal with planeswalkers and creatures as well as enchantments or artifacts, you name it. Anguished Unmaking can deal with it. It does cost us 3 life, but thanks to those Anointer Priests, that should not be a problem. We also have 2 copies of Collective Effort, which is very powerful in this deck, since all of the modes are very relevant. Also has Escalate with the added cost of tapping an untapped creature, and with all our tokens that's an easy requirement. So this can destroy a creature with power 4 or greater, can destroy an enchantment, and can put a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control. So all of the modes are very powerful. Usually you destroy a creature and then put some +1/+1 counters on your creatures, but of course if you're up against a deck with powerful enchantments, it's nice to have access to the Collective Effort. Then we also have Oketra the True, which is a very powerful addition from Amonkhet, so a 4-mana god, 3/6 double strike indestructible, can't attack or block unless we control at least 3 other creatures, but again, not a big deal in this deck. And then for 4 mana we can make a 1/1 warrior creature token with vigilance if we don't have anything better to do with our mana. So just a very powerful card that survives sweeper effects, so that we can quickly rebuild after a sweeper. We also have 2 copies of Visionary Augmenter, which is just an upgraded Weaponcraft Enthusiast. Rather than having an 0/1 body, this is a 2/1, but still has Fabricate 2, which is the important part. Then the big addition from Amonkhet is Anointed Procession, so 3 and a white for an enchantment that says if an effect would create 1 or more tokens under our control, it creates twice that many tokens instead, so basically means that it doubles all of the token generation we have. Also works with clue tokens, although we don't really have any clue tokens in this deck, and if you're lucky enough to have both copies of Anointed Procession in play, then you quadruple all of the token generation, which quickly will win you the game. We also have Sram's Expertise, which for 4 mana makes 3 1/1 servo tokens and also lets us cast a card with converted mana cost 3 or less from our hand for free when we cast the Expertise. So this combines very nicely with Collective Effort, since we will get the tokens first and then we still get the option to escalate the Collective Effort, so that can lead to a very explosive and devastating turn. We also have Gideon, Ally of Zendikar, which is just a powerful card by itself, but also plays well with our token theme, as it can make an Anthem when he -4s, which if he dies also enables Revolt. Then we can also just make some Knight tokens that might be doubled, and then of course a +1 can also take out an opponent very quickly. Then we still have Angel of Invention, 5 mana, 2/1, Flying, Vigilance, Lifelink, Fabricate 2, and other creatures we control get +1/+1, so most of the time we will be choosing Fabricate 2 to make 2 servo tokens, but there are situations where you might want the bigger lifelinking creature. Then we have Regal Caracal, which for 5 mana is a 3/3 cat that makes 2 1/1 cat tokens with a lifelink, and the Caracal also gives other cat creatures we control +1/+1 and lifelink. So for 5 mana we get 7 power and 7 toughness, and 4 of that power has lifelink, so that's a lot of stats for just 5 mana, and of course the fact that it makes tokens plays well with our entire deck. Then we have Start to Finish. Start is an instant that makes 2 1/1 warrior creature tokens with vigilance, and then we can cast Finish from the graveyard at sorcery speed thanks to Aftermath, and as an additional cost we have to sacrifice a creature, but then we get to destroy any target creature, so that's a nice bit of value that we can get. And then we have Dusk till Dawn, which can be a nice one-sided sweeper in this deck. So Dusk destroys all creatures with power 3 or greater. Of course, most of our tokens are rather small, so they won't die to this effect. And then Dawn can return all creature cards with power 2 or less from our graveyard to our hand. So that also includes creatures like Weaponcraft Enthusiast or Visionary Augmenter. Even our Angel of Invention has only 2 power, but we would still be able to get it back from the graveyard, and of course when we recast the Angel or any of the other Fabricate creatures we still get those tokens back. So a nice swingy card that can get us out of a difficult situation. And then our mana base, we've got 8 plains, 6 swamps, 2 Shambling Vent, which can also gain us some life. Then we have 2 copies of Westvale Abbey, which is an important win condition in this deck. So we can tap the Westvale Abbey, pay 5 mana and sacrifice 5 creatures to transform it, and then it becomes Ormondal Profane Prince, which is a 9/7 flying, lifelinking, indestructible haste creature that can quickly take out an opponent. And if we have some spare mana we can also pay 5, tap the Abbey, pay a life to make a 1/1 token. And then we also have 2 copies of Isolated Chapel and 4 Evolving Wilds, which fix our mana but also enable Revolt for our Hidden Stockpiles and our Fatal Push. So that's the deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Alright, let's take a look at our opener, which has a bit too much mana going on here, although we do have Westvale Abbey, plus lots of ways to make tokens. I think this hand's close, but I would rather try again. And yeah, this is better. We do need a 3rd land, but if we do, then this hand is very good. So let's keep it and hope to get there. So if we do draw a 3rd land, probably leading with the Enthusiast. Could also lead with Start in case we need to cast Finish right away. Opponent on black-green, and there's our 3rd land. Alright, so let's say go. I could see casting Start to Finish if our opponent casts something like a Winding Constrictor that we need to kill as soon as possible. And does our opponent have a 2-drop? They do, and it's a Scrapheap Scrounger, alright. So not the most threatening creature, although it does hit pretty hard. And Smuggler's Copter to draw, turn late unfortunately. I don't hate playing Weaponcraft Enthusiast and then still just taking the damage from the scrap heap, so if we do find land number 4 for Gideon, we have the Enthusiast to protect our Gideon. I think we go for that line here. Could also see casting start to finish because the 1/1s have vigilance, so we can attack and then still maybe block the scrap heap. But at this point, given that we have collective effort in hand, I kind of just want to make as many tokens as possible before casting collective effort to put +1/+1 counters on our creatures. So we'll just take 3 damage here. And their opponent has a Rootbound Crag, so they could have red cards here. Did not find land number 4, so I think we'll just hit for 2. And nothing from the opponent. And the plan here is to cast Start at the end of turn. Opponent hits us for 3 again, that's fine. This is where having an Anointer Priest would be nice. And there's a Tireless Tracker, alright. And does our opponent have a land to go with it? They do, it's a forest. But we do have Start to Finish here, which can deal with the Tireless Tracker. We could technically also wait and just cast the Collective Effort once the tracker accumulates a +1/+1 counter. In which case we could do something else this turn, like casting this Gideon, which is pretty appealing, although it is under quite a bit of pressure from these 2 creatures. So could also see casting the Visionary Augmenter, just to add some more tokens to the board before casting the Collective Effort. Lots of options once again. Could also play Gideon and just -4 right away, which would also be reasonable. I think I'll just try to go as wide as possible here with the Visionary Augmenter first. Make some more 1/1s and say go. And of course hoping that our opponent plays into our Collective Effort. They do have another land. Hopefully they don't have something like a Chandra Flamecaller to sweep the board. Opponent does sacrifice a clue, so we now have a target for Collective Effort. And does our opponent attack? They do, but just with the Scrap Heap Scrounger. I think I'll take it once again. Not too worried about getting burnt out from the opponent here. And there's Anguished Unmaking, but yeah, now it's time to cast the Collective Effort. Destroy this, put the counters here, and we can tap the Enthusiast here. And let's see if the opponent has a response. They can sack the clue, but that doesn't really matter. Opponent has a Twin Bolt, alright, that's reasonable. Takes out 2 of our creatures before we get the +1/+1 counters, but we still get plenty of +1/+1 counters here. So we can attack our opponent for 10 here. Opponent also has a Fatal Push for our Vigilant creature, that's fine, still takes 8. And we still have a pretty reasonable hand. Of course, we still also have the Finish in the graveyard. And didn't have the opportunity to cast our Gideon yet. Opponent sacks a clue, which means no Chandra Flamecaller this turn. Scrap Heap of course can't block, so that means if we just play Gideon and Ultimate to give our creatures +1/+1, we should be able to win through a blocker. Opponent has Cultivator's Caravan, So they can crew the caravan to block one of our tokens here. And if they also have a fatal push, they could crew the caravan, block one of our tokens, and then fatal push another token. So even if we Gideon ultimate, we would not be dealing lethal damage here. Although we could just Anguished Unmaking the caravan, and then our opponent takes 9 damage. So let's see here, we have another land, so maybe a few more options. We could cast Copter plus one of our 3 mana cards, including the finish. So if we ultimate Gideon, opponent just blocks 1. They do take lethal, so they would need another removal spell for 1 or 2 mana, since they can also tap the caravan. So I'm wondering what the safest way to play this turn is. I think maybe just attacking with everyone, and then playing start plus Smuggler's Copter should be pretty safe, since that gives us blockers at instant speed. Plus another way to fly over, plus potentially block. And it also leaves us with the flexibility of casting Anguished Unmaking. So opponent takes 7. And they do have another fatal push as well. So we were not dealing lethal this turn no matter what. So opponent just takes 5. Play Copter. Could still cast Finish here on the caravan if we wanted to. We'd have to sacrifice the Weaponcraft Enthusiast. I think I prefer casting Start here and leaving up Anguished Unmaking. So now the opponent's at 5, they have a flyer they have to deal with, and any creature they play we can still potentially kill with our finish. And poor Gideon didn't even get the time to shine. So 7 mana for the opponents. Uncrop Crasher. Alright, so the opponent can potentially deal 8 damage here. But they are staying on defense, we are casting Start. And looks like the opponent has seen enough. So now we have land number 6, which means we can Anguished Unmaking plus Finish. Get rid of the opponent's only blockers. Seems pretty safe. So we can crew the Copter with, let's say, the Weaponcraft Enthusiast. Then we can cast Finish on the Crasher, sacrificing our tapped Enthusiast. We can move to combat, attack with everyone. Why not discard a swamp? And if the opponent goes to crew the caravan to block with it, we can still Anguished Unmaking, but we didn't even have to. Alright, sweet, on to the next one. Alright, let's take a look at our opener, which looks quite good. So we'll keep. We've got a turn to Militia into Enthusiast, plus we have the Procession and the Augmenter to go with it. So can't really complain. Let's see what the opponent is up to. So of course, thanks to the Enthusiast, the Militia Captain could already transform on turn number 4 on our upkeep. So the opponent will need some interaction, but with a swamp they could easily just have a fatal push. But I think we still go for it. Make them have it. And it's not like we have anything else we can do. Alright, looks like they did not have Fatal Push at the very least. And they have a Forest into Glint-Sleeve Siphoner, alright. That we can manage. So actually here, I kind of want to attack with the Militia Captain before playing the Enthusiast, since the opponent is unlikely to want to trade the Siphoner. But once they see the Enthusiast, then the Captain becomes a high priority target, but we're not blocking with the Captain, so might as well attack. So might as well attack first. And now that we drew the Stockpile, even if our opponent somehow should block, we can still play the Stockpile afterwards and get the Revolt. Opponent indeed doesn't block, but now we get to play the Enthusiast, which forces action from the opponent, otherwise our Captain could transform already. Opponent still only 1 energy, but if they attack they'll get a second one, and then they can start drawing extra cards. And there's a Smoldering Marsh, so do they have removal? They do not, just an Olivia mobilized for war, which is a scary card, but is not gonna stop our Captain from transforming. And of course we're not blocking here, since we want to have 4 creatures for the Militia Captain to transform. And found a second Militia Captain, that's pretty spicy. So could play the second Captain here, which I don't hate. Could also play the Stockpile and sacrifice the Enthusiast to scry 1, try to find another land. But then again, if we are just playing these Militia Captains that are transforming, that's probably good enough. So might as well play it pre-combat so that our other cult leader is bigger. And hit for 5. Opponent takes it. Get a token. Opponent can draw a card here from the Siphoner, and they're probably gonna need it. So they did decide to pay a life to draw a card at the cost of 2 energy as well. But if they don't have a sweeper effect here, they are in trouble, and this doesn't really strike me as a deck that should be playing sweeper effects. I guess if they can just play 2 spot removal spells on the Captain and the cult leader, they're also fine. Instead it's a Voltaic Brawler, which they can give haste to with Olivia here. And they do indeed. So they can actually race us back potentially here. And a Longtusk Cub as well, which they might also give haste here, since they're probably not going to use all the cards in hand. Alright, so they're actually assembling quite the task force here. So they gain an energy, they can spend an energy to give the Brawler Trample. So how much damage are we taking? If they pump the Cub, that's 4, 9, 12. Still not lethal. And if the Captain transforms, that's at least another 6/6, and our opponent's just dead on the way back. So let's just double check. So 5, 9, 14. And yeah, no way to pump their creatures additionally. So that seems fine. And opponent already played their land. So they will just die to the transformed Militia Captain. And drew another Procession. Unfortunately, no 4th land to go with it, but I guess the Militia Captains were enough. So despite our opponent having a very explosive turn there, still managed to outrace them thanks to turn 2 Captain into turn 3 Enthusiast. And there we go, on to the next one. Alright, let's have a look at our opener, which looks pretty good. We're on the play, we've got Copter and Anointer Priest to look for some more lands. And we have Anointed Procession as well, as a nice top hand. So can't really go wrong, unless we don't draw any lands, of course. Opponent with a Shambling Vent turn 1. Let's go ahead and play out our Copter. And what does our opponent do on turn 2? Planes and anything else? Fragmentize, that's unfortunate. It's gonna take care of our Smuggler's Copter. Another card you see very often. Although I guess it could have also dealt with our Hidden Stockpile. Alright, land is good. So we have the option of going Stockpile, which doesn't really make a token yet, or we can just run out a Priest. Although if the Priest gets killed, we don't get any value. While if we play the Stockpile first and then they kill the Priest, at least we get the token engine going. So I kind of like playing out the Stockpile. And if they have another Fragmentize, at least they're not killing the Procession. Another isolated chapel from the opponents, and do they play anything else? Always watching, alright. So that indicates maybe an enchantment or a creature deck, but we do have the Anguished Unmaking to deal with the always watching. So for now let's just play out the Priest and say go. Could sacrifice a Priest to scry 1, but don't really feel like it, as the Priest in play seems more valuable than scrying 1. And we can always do that later once we have the Procession in play, as we'll get more tokens. Opponent untaps. And what do they do on turn 4? Apparently they don't do anything. And wow, we found Evolving Wilds, which is actually perfect here. So we could attack with the Priests, although the opponent can block with Shambling Vent, and the opponent would just gain 2 life for free. I guess we'll just keep the Priest at home, just to block the Shambling Vent as well. And we'll just get a Plains here. And then play the Procession, and thanks to Revolt we'll get 2 tokens. Unless our opponent has an Anguished Unmaking, of course. Instead it looks like the opponent has a Cast Out, in which case we can attack with the Priest here. And they do cast the Cast Out, which can exile any of our enchantments, and they decide to go with the Stockpile actually, rather than the Procession. Of course we don't have anything that makes tokens yet, and now that we already used our Evolving Wilds, we don't get any value, even if we Anguished Unmaking the Cast Out next turn. The Revolt was already kind of wasted. But I guess we get to get in for 1 with the Anointer Priest. But next turn, of course, we do have the Caracal coming down, which is gonna make tons of tokens. And there's a Thalia Heretic Cathar, which is a 4/3, thanks to the Always Watching in play. Our creatures and non-basics enter the battlefield tapped. But we're just going to cast a Regal Caracal here. And get tons of cat tokens. Of course they do enter tapped, but who cares? No attacks with the Priest. So we'll say go. Opponent animating the Shambling Vent, which is a 3/4 thanks to Always Watching, so they do get to get in for a healthy amount here. As we'll not block here. And we have some interesting options with the Anguished Unmaking. Opponent with the second Always Watching. Alright, so I guess that means getting rid of the Always Watching is not that appealing anymore. Instead we can just Anguished Unmaking the Thalia. Could also Anguished Unmaking the Cast Out to get our stockpile back, which actually does stop the life gain from the Shambling Vent, since we can block with a creature and then sacrifice it to prevent our opponent gaining life. But we can also gain a bunch of life here just by attacking with everyone. And then casting an Enthusiast, since we're not afraid of sweepers here. Make a bunch of servos, gain a bunch of life thanks to the Anointer Priest, and hope that this is good enough. If our opponent has something like a Declaration in Stone, that would be pretty sad. Instead it's an Obnixilis, which can kill our Caracal, but that's still gonna leave our opponent dead, I believe, since we can animate the Shambling Vent as well. So instead they need to plus to find an answer, but I doubt they can find anything for just 1 mana here. Alright, so let's animate the Shambling Vent for good measure. Move to combat and attack everyone at the opponent, leave back Enthusiast, and that should do it. Alright, sweet, on to the next one. Alright, let's take a look at our opener, which looks alright. We've got a turn 2 Copter, hopefully we can crew it in the meantime, and then we've got Augmenter plus Oketra, which are both pretty good, especially combined. Opponent with a tapped Wandering Fumarole, turn 1. And Westvale Abbey to draw. Think we want to fetch with Evolving Wilds here, thin out our deck a bit. Could potentially keep the wilds around for revolt purposes, but getting those tapped lands out of the way is also valuable. So opponent's perhaps on a Grixis control deck, and that's a nice pickup. Start means we get to start the engines on our Smuggler Copter and subsequently enable Oketra. Opponent tapping out for an Oath of Jace, so perhaps they are on some sort of Reanimator deck. They discarded 2 lands though, so no reanimation happening right now. So I think we'll just play out the start main phase so we can crew the Copter and maybe get rid of some of these excess lands that we don't need. And then next turn we can drop Oketra, so she can start attacking right away. I guess Isolated Chapel is a slight upgrade over Swamp, so we'll take it. And if the opponent plays a creature we have to deal with, there's always Finish in the graveyard. So 4 lands for the opponent. And a Never on our token. Alright, that's acceptable. And the nice thing about playing Oketra here is that despite not being active, we can still crew our Smuggler's Copter with it. And if our opponent is playing sweeper effects, then of course with both the Copter and the Oketra we still have a board presence even after a sweeper effect happens. And I guess we'll keep the Shambling Vent, since don't really need to cast a 5-drop next turn and still have some untapped lands left over. So next turn, main phase 1, we can play the Augmenter, so the Oketra can attack, and we'll be hitting for 10 damage. And the opponent's casting return on our finish, which is pretty nice, so now we don't get to get the aftermath on that. But I guess it's not the end of the world, so still gonna play the Augmenter pre-combat so that Oketra can attack. Make 2 servos. Could have also considered just making a token with Oketra, crewing the Copter with it, and then we have the required 3 other creatures so Oketra can attack. And that way we can play around a sweeper effect from the opponent even better. But I think this is still fine since we'll have the Shambling Vent for next turn. And now we get to dig a little deeper with the Smuggler's Copter. And Anguished Unmaking I'll keep. So does the opponent chump with the zombie? They do. So they only take 3. Play a Shambling Vent, say go. And if they don't have a sweeper effect, I think they're dead next turn. So 5 mana. What's it gonna be? It's gonna be a Kalitas, Traitor of Geth, but we do have the Anguished Unmaking to deal with it. So, Anointer Priest. Let's just Anguished Unmaking the Kalitas here. And then our opponent should just be dead, but I guess we can main phase cast the Anointer Priest to crew the Copter. So we can attack for an additional point. Should our opponent have Fatal Push, then they still take 11. So it didn't really matter. And we'll discard the Shambling Vent. We even had the Westvale Abbey ready to go next turn. So Oketra beatdown takes the game. I wanna thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed. And as always, have a nice day.